In today's video, we're going to continue with another two new kingdoms, the fungi kingdom and the protist kingdom. So as you guys already know, there's 6 kingdoms of living organisms: plants, animals, fungi, protists, bacteria, and archaea. We already talked about plants and animals. We're going to continue talking about fungi and protists in this video. So, the main type of fungi you guys should know. First, it's the yeast. Yeast, as we said, they are unicellular. They're the only unicellular fungi. And we usually use them daily in the kitchen to make dough, rice, and in the making of bread and dough. When we add some sugar and water to the fungi, to the yeast, we notice that in a while they're going to make bubbles, okay? And this proves that they are releasing carbon dioxide during respiration because they are living things. That's why we see those bubbles coming from the tiny carbon dioxide. So if you guys want, you can try this experiment at home. You can put some yeast with some sugar, a little bit of sugar, and dissolve it in a little bit of water as well. And wait, don't let the water be too cold or too hot. It should be just warm water, or else the yeast will die. And wait a while, and then you will begin noticing bubbles. These bubbles are carbon dioxide. This proves that the yeast is alive and it's decomposing the sugar and releasing carbon dioxide as all organisms do. So it would be a fun experiment to try. Another type of fungi is the mold. You can see here in this picture, there's mold growing on the bread because it's decomposing the bread for energy. We should know that fungi, they're not consumers or producers, they're decomposers. That means they break down the nutrients inside of something, and then they will use these as energy to grow. So they are decomposers. Of course, mushrooms are also another type of fungi. The most important characteristics you have to know about the fungi is that they are really important decomposers because we know decomposers are an important part of the food chain because they return nutrients, they recycle nutrients into the soil, and so therefore they allow more and more producers to grow. They also clean up our environment from all the dead organisms and animal waste because they will decompose them and return nutrients into the soil. And of course, the second thing you have to know is that they are mostly multi-celled, except for yeast, that's unicelled. And even though we might see them growing in the soil, they're not plants. They don't have true roots, stems, and leaves. And you can see pictures here of the yeast and the mushroom. One is multi-celled and one is unicelled. So again, fungi, they're mostly multi-celled, they're decomposers, and they recycle nutrients into the soil, making them a very important part of the food chain. And of course, they don't have, like plants, they don't have any chlorophyll, and they don't perform photosynthesis, unlike plants. They're not able to do that. Okay, that's why they were removed from the plant kingdom and we gave them their own kingdom, the fungi kingdom. So the fungi, they are, along with the bacteria and many insects, they're decomposers, and as you guys already know, whenever anything dies, whenever plants or consumers die, they will be decomposed, and in return nutrients will be returned to the soil, and so therefore new producers are able to grow, and that's how the food chain continues in every ecosystem. Okay, now we're going to discuss the protists. Okay, unlike fungi, protists are mostly unicelled and not multicelled. Protists, that's why you don't see them much around you. There are multicelled protists, and we're going to see an example of that, but mostly they're unicelled. We find them mostly living in water, like in ponds and lakes, even in the ocean. And we also find them in wet soil, okay? They always need to grow in damp areas. We never find them in any dry places. Protists, some of them can actually make us sick. Not all of them, of course. For example, the famous disease malaria is caused by a protist. Now, protists are strange because some of them can be producers, and some of them can be consumers, and some of them can be decomposers. So we can't say like we do in plants, they're producers or animals are consumers. Here we have a little bit of every group, okay? Some of them, they make their own food. Some protists, they eat and they capture prey, and some of them are decomposers. They decay dead organisms.
Organisms are made up of cells. Some have lots, some only one. Protists are single-celled organisms that don't quite classify as an animal or a plant, but fall somewhere in between. They function as an entity all to themselves, which means, like most organisms, they eat, move, reproduce, and excrete waste. And these single-celled all-stars each have their own unique way of doing these things. When it comes to eating, some protists use the trusty surround and digest method. Some sweep food to their special mouth parts, while others use a mix of photosynthesis and the old surround and digest method. In order to move, some protists shape themselves into false feet to blob their way through the environment, while others move about with little hairs called cilia or whip-like structures called flagella. And when it comes to excretion, amoeba, paramecium, and euglena all tackle it using vacuoles, little organelles that collect waste and contract to squirt it out of the cell. So whether it's a group of 37 trillion cells or just one, we have more in common than you might think.
Okay, here are examples of the plant-like protists. Plant-like protist means they behave like plants. So now we know that plants aren't the only thing on Earth that do photosynthesis. We also have these microscopic protists. They also do photosynthesis. So that's new because we always thought that only plants do photosynthesis. But now we know that we also have these organisms that can do photosynthesis. They capture sunlight, so they have chlorophyll. You can see the green material here inside of them. So they make photosynthesis, so they behave like producers. Two examples of plant-like protists that perform photosynthesis. It's called, one of them, the first one is microscopic. It's called the euglena. The second one is brown algae. Now these are multicelled. They're also known as seaweed. Okay, you can see them. I think you've often seen them. And they're really important to the water, both of them, the euglena, especially the brown algae, because there's a lot of them in the water, because they do a photosynthesis, and in return they remove carbon dioxide from the water like plants do for us, and they give oxygen to all the animals in the water, living in the water. So that's why they're really an important part of water habitats, because they provide oxygen for the organisms living there. Animal-like protists, they often move around because animals need to move in order to capture prey. They can sense and capture prey, and of course they are consumers because they capture prey and eat. Two examples are the paramecium. They often have, you see these hair-like parts around the paramecium. They often have parts to help them move around. They often have like tiny hair parts to help them move and capture prey. So these are the most known types of animal-like protists, the paramecium and the amoeba. We also have fungi-like protists, okay? So they act like fungi. They are decomposers. Okay, an example is a type of protist called slime mold. Okay, it's not a fungi. It's a fungi-like protist. Okay, because it behaves like fungi, but it's not. Okay, so it's not grouped in the fungi family. And they are unicelled actually, but you can see them with your eyes because they live together in colonies, like in large groups. That's why they're actually seen, but they are really unicelled organisms. So of course I want you to read page 182 and to highlight these important facts. Here we have a picture about the mushroom. Mushrooms are fungi. And of course we have a picture of the single-celled yeast that can only be seen with a microscope, and we can also see mold growing on the bread. And they're just talking about everything I just told you about the fungi, that they do not make their own food. They feed on dead or decayed material. Yeast is another type of fungi, but unlike mushrooms, it's made up of one cell. Okay, and we have a very important question that you need to answer. It says, list 2 reasons why fungi are classified in a different kingdom from plants. So why are fungi different from plants? Give 2 reasons. Page 183, you also have to read it. It's about the protists, and it shows you the protist I just discussed with you, the brown algae that does photosynthesis, the euglena that also does photosynthesis, and it shows you the amoeba and the paramecium, which are animal-like protists. Okay? And it's just telling you that the protists may act like plants or animals or fungi. Most of them are made up of one cell. Most of them are microscopic. However, some of them are not microscopic, like the brown algae. And some of them live in colonies, like in groups, large groups, like I just showed you, the slime molds that I just showed you. Okay, so this is what I want you to know about fungi kingdom and the protist kingdom. That's it. Thank you.